I had a client, they went into an audiovisual showroom and there was a pair of monitor speakers about 5 feet tall. The salesperson put on one of Adele's tracks. They broke out into tears within seconds. And this daunting price of $66,000 for that pair of speakers was the first purchase that they made for their Mercer Street apartment here in Manhattan. Watching them and how it affected them, the importance of that to them as people, it was overriding every other decision we were there to help them make. It was more important than the textile scheme, than anything else, because of how it impacted them as people.
The Fidelity Exchange, pulling back the curtain on brands shaping high-end audio and more.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Fidelity Exchange. I'm Drew Baird from Moon Audio, and today I'm talking to Randall Pavarini, Vice President and COO of Pavarini Design, an award-winning luxury interior design firm based in New York City. Randall and his team have pioneered something really interesting, the Zoom Room concept, which brings broadcast quality video and audio into beautifully designed home offices. If you're interested in how technology and designs are coming together in new ways, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Randall, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you, Drew. It's a pleasure to be here and to be on your program. Let's talk.
Yeah, man. So let's start with your path. You know, you went from an English major at Boston College to vice president at Pavarini Design. How did that journey unfold?
Well, I attribute it all to good parents. I had nurturing
Amen.
parents, and I really was one of those high achieving type kids who wanted to learn more and was willing to put in a lot of time doing homework and whatnot. And I excelled in school and did very well at Boston College. And come my junior year, after I spent a year abroad in Ecuador, my minor was in Spanish.
Cool.
I came to realize when I came back to the States that, I'm not pursuing my dream yet. What I've done is created a great foundation where I could learn to speak, read, and write. And so I had one of those serious discussions with mom and dad. And we arrived at the conclusion that I needed yet more schooling. And so one of the things that I've always been very proud of is I feel like I have a third eye. I can see what's not there in my head. Um, I've often, been able to, think about an interior or spaces in general and how they could be. I had a relationship with our interior designer growing up and architects over the course of my schooling career, and thought, I'm missing out if I don't pursue one or the other, architecture or interior design. And I finally decided after much deliberation that if I were to proceed with an architectural degree, I probably would have a lot of work that I probably really wouldn't love. There's a lot of gut work in the field of architecture that I wouldn't put in the category of fun. And at that time, it seemed if I could have this glamorous career in interior design, where I could transform spaces visually and then have them published in magazines and have a hand in all aspects of lifestyle and human function in an environment, I think that would be very gratifying. And with that, I looked into other colleges and university and chose to enroll at the New York School of Interior Design and got an additional bachelor's degree in interior design.
So tell us about working with Charles Pavarini III and the family legacy. I understand your grandfather built some iconic New York City buildings.
Yeah. So when I moved to New York, very clearly I needed a source of income. That, in speaking with my dad, he was willing to pay for the education, but the commute was wearing on me. I grew up in Middlebury, Connecticut, and 2 hours in a car in the wee hours of the morning and coming back at night was just too much to manage. And so I got an apartment and was looking for work. And I went to the career counseling department, and Charles Pavarini was looking for an assistant. And at that point in his career, his partner was retiring, and he was looking for somebody to help him. And so I interviewed with him at the end of June in 1998, and this was a Thursday. And he asked if I could start work on Monday. And with that, I started my 30-year career in interior design with Charles. And within about 2 or 3 weeks, we realized we had a very symbiotic relationship, and it blossomed into a wonderful career. Um, the Pavarini family is responsible for a lot of construction projects worldwide, but they were forerunners in reinforced concrete. And many of the buildings that they built were iconic ones, such as the Seagram Building, such
Mm-hmm.
as the United Nations Complex,
Oh, wow.
all of Lincoln Center,
Hmm.
five wings on the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Kushner Building, 666 Fifth Avenue, much of the resort industry in Puerto Rico. And they were taking their business all over the country. And so the influence on Charles and on me has been career changing. And what it's really done for us is made us realize that we're just not interested in what things look like. It's the
Mm-hmm.
mechanics of them.
Yep.
It's what it is about the space, and especially the function, right? It has to look great, but not unless it works. And
Yep.
so that's where we have this really intense sort of perspective of, let's integrate all of the technology. Let's decide where all of the plumbing and electrical is going to be placed, all of the architectural detail, and integrating lighting in unique ways, indirect lighting. All of these things are part of our practice as interior designers, and I don't think that we would have had such inspiration were it not for our forefathers, who really made a career out of all of that on an architectural level. And so with that influence as interior designers, I think it's really programmed us to tackle the more complicated jobs, the ones that involve working with high level consultants who are doing things that not average designers generally take on.
Yeah. Fun fact. So I was born and raised on 84th between Park and Lex. So I was right down from the Metropolitan Museum of Art, one of the most amazing structures on the planet. And in my previous life, I went to Penn State to be a structural engineer, where I specialized in three-dimensional structures. So I get the whole space thing, and it's carried over into my passion business that I started 20 years ago, which is Moon Audio, with audio, and being able to see not just, you got to be able to think three-dimensional and be able to see a space and how it's going to fit, not just in what you're doing, but exactly what I'm doing with audio. I mean, it goes hand in hand, and I totally get, a lot of the architects I can remember, they'd have to, they could paint this beautiful picture, but then the structural engineer had to make sure that it had to work
Yeah.
somehow. And sometimes there was a lot of butting heads because, a lot of the stuff that they wanted to do to make it beautified, if we will, if that's a word, just didn't work in terms of structural analysis. So anyway, cool stuff. So
Absolutely.
when did you start noticing the shift between, luxury clients wanting technology integrated, beautifully, rather than just hidden away, and trying to make it part of, making it not so much a hidden feature, but now prominent in what they're doing in designing their homes and apartments and so forth?
I definitely did not see that really happening until the 21st century. It wasn't until it seemed that a lot of people, and this is my own perspective, until a lot of people started looking to the markets to find, products like tube amps and other types of audio devices from the past, that there became this new interest in showing it all. For instance, I have a client who's an avid collector of all things audio and visual, vintage particularly, and the respect that he has for his Marantz amplifier
Yeah, yeah.
is something that's come from this new industry of the vintage products being reconditioned for
Yep.
modern use.
Yep.
And then all the Bluetooth technology and others that help make that possible. You probably see behind me over my shoulder, maybe it's right over there, I myself have a Bluetooth phonograph. And the idea behind that, is something that I wouldn't have thought of. I mean, with a home with an old-fashioned hi-fi setup that I had in the modern era, now I can connect it to my, subwoofer audio system that just runs my flat screen TV. And so I think for me, I started noticing all of that and embracing it myself within the last 15, more like 10 years, I would say.
I think a lot of this stuff, sorry to interrupt, it's a nostalgia thing, where, a lot of us are looking back at our past growing up at what our parents might have had in terms of really cool old tech. I mean, I've been doing a whole bunch of reverberation on stuff and this is sad to say, I mean, like with my parents, I used to say old stuff was like from the 40s and the 50s and stuff like that. And now I'm talking back that I'm restoring stuff from the 90s. And I'm like, the 90s to me just seemed like yesterday, right? But, I get it. My kids are like, man, you're old. But anyway, you said you had an old system. Tell us about the old hi-fi system you had.
I for my 14th birthday got a Yamaha amplifier and a dual cassette recorder and a phonograph and a compact disc player with a set of Polk audio speakers.
Very nice.
And I blasted ZZ Top and Def Leppard and White Snake and all until mom and dad just could not stand it. And I treasured the system and sold it along with my house in Vermont last year to my very best friend, who is the audio collector that I was speaking about with the Marantz amplifier. And he now is the proud owner of that piece of nostalgia.
Very cool. So let's jump into what I'm really interested in learning about and what sort of sparked the Zoom room concept.
So Charles and I, as we always do, have discussions when we're taking on a new venture. And part of the concept of the Zoom room was specifically to create a space, and it's after experience that we did it for show, but that tests the boundaries and showcases a new type of innovation at home. And one of the things that we couldn't help but notice, because every time we would be on a Zoom call with another professional, we found that it seems like most of the people who are on Zoom don't realize what's going on in the background while they're trying to communicate at a professional level.
Right.
And so, how often are you on a phone call with somebody on a Zoom call, and you see their toaster on the counter behind
That's
them,
right.
or their living room is littered with
Yeah.
toys, or the dog is running through the space, and
Right.
it's cacophonous oftentimes because they're not thinking about sound attenuation or necessarily about the decor and whether or not the decor is commensurate with their level as a professional on the Zoom call. So I think it really stemmed from that frustration and repeatedly, dealing with high level people who don't come across that way in communication.
Yeah, and it's also about, I mean, in some ways, it's about expressing yourself, sort of like the clothes you wear. You know what I mean? It paints sort of a picture of sort of what you're into and the colors you like and all that stuff, too. I mean, yeah. So what kind of tech were you implementing? iPad-controlled cameras, acoustical treatments, lighting design for an on-camera presence. Break down sort of those technical elements for us.
So why don't I talk about it like from the outside in? So the most important things that we needed to take care of were attenuating sound. On a Manhattan on 12th Street,
Yeah.
it's a busy block. There are a lot of trucks, there's honking, there's alternate street parking going out the window,
Yeah.
Students going in and out of Parsons New School, making a lot of noise on the street. So the first thing we had to do was address sound.
Yeah.
And as old world type interior designers, upholstering walls is a wonderful trick. Now there are modern innovations of things you can do and apply to walls, but honestly, batting and traditional upholstery does an excellent job about canceling reverberation.
Mm-hmm.
And for the windows, floor to ceiling blinds that we were able to tilt with a wand so that we could adjust the daylight coming in from the outside. And then doing an iconic backdrop, like no different from a television host or a comedian, right? Their set, their stage is an extension of who they are and makes them iconic. And with that, we designed the wooden wall, which was telescoping, and in the center, in between the layers of the telescoping wood, emanated light. So we had LED lights framing them. And in the center, there was a piece of crystalline stone. So that when you're interviewing in that space and you're on camera, you have this warm light coming through the stone. You have this backdrop that is silent. And we also had a lighting fixture on the ceiling that was bouncing light off of the ceiling. So we had reflected light within the space. And the ceiling, too, we treated with a wall covering that had a high sound factor rating, so that also it in a trapunto style with padding inside of it, it was able also to cancel the reverberation. So those are the things we did to prepare the room itself so that we could bring in the technology for the recording. And so we had a pair of follow cameras, the types that you would use in conference room technology, that can either follow movement or move to established presets that have servo motors that follow the commands on a screen. So we had an iPad, which we wanted to go as low tech as possible so that we could show that you can have this beautiful environment and have key pieces of technology that stand out and not have a lot of extra clutter. That it was the concept. So we ran the system with an iPad. It was connected to a flat screen TV on the wall and podcast grade audio equipment. I wish I had known you before we completed the Zoom room, because I would have approached you for the type of equipment that you would have specified. But our audio people who worked with us sourced high definition audio capture microphones, and it seemed to work rather effectively in capturing the video. I think in that sense, the only intermediary that maybe couldn't be HD is the Zoom capture recording interface. I think, if we were to do it professionally in the future, I would look to I'd look to you to help us find what is a better interface besides Zoom if you really want to capture HD quality video and sound.
What's really impressive is that you were able to silence the room. As somebody, who grew up in New York and spent 20 years trying to sleep through the night without hearing anything, like, the building I lived in was solid concrete, right? And the subway, the East Side subway ran right under the building. So every time there was a train, you could feel it, hear it, even though it was, I was on the third floor. So we're talking, I don't know, a couple hundred feet through concrete and stuff like that, you still heard it and felt it. And the fire trucks and the police cars and the trash trucks in the morning, slamming all the trash with the broken bottles. I mean, silencing stuff in New York City, especially if you're on a lower floor, is pretty difficult to do. So that's pretty impressive. So beyond the Zoom room, what other sort of listening rooms and smart homes are trending and playing out across different spaces? We had another conversation with a designer in Texas that they're really getting into, like, prayer rooms and meditation rooms and just some place to go and sort of chill out, almost like when you're going to get a massage. It's all about getting into a room that can sort of settle your nerves, if you will, in the crazy world that we live in now. So besides Zoom rooms, what else are you sort of seeing going on in the city in terms of making, improvements to rooms similarly?
So what you talk about, it's interesting you mention it. So when we do an exhibition, we create rooms like this, right? That are game changers. And what you're referencing it sounds to me like an extension of wellness. And so in
Exactly.
2018, we created a wellness experience at home. And in the main space, we had an acrylic massage table made and an abundance of natural crystals. We installed on the roof of this townhouse right behind Lenox Hill Hospital. We installed a recirculating fountain with multiple fountain heads. And when you open the door to the fountain, you could hear the water trickling throughout the mansion, because it would go you could hear the sound just fall right down the staircase. And it had outdoor spaces for relaxation and such, and a terrific, in this case, hidden audio system, so that, sounds were very important. It really wasn't about a visual experience. There were not televisions and such. It was kind of about getting away from that and just being able to have, clean, clear sound the sound, the presence of moving water, wooden elements for the wabi sabi aesthetic, all in a very monochromatic, soothing space. And we call that at home a wellness retreat. And that was the concept of our last exhibition.
Yeah, and I'm sure. I mean, COVID was a terrible thing, but I bet that really boomed that side of the business because we're all trying to sort of break out of our shells. We all got so isolated. I talk about this so much. I've seen just so much isolation and, stress and anxiety that came out of COVID, and, trying to find our way back to normalcy and wellness, like you're talking about, is got to be huge part of the architectural business now, I bet.
Yeah, I think it's becoming more important to those at home. On the new builds that we've done, we are incorporating spaces like that. What I am finding though is that, oftentimes the consumer wants consultation and then they see it as their project. Now that there are products on the market that can be purchased, it's something that, they don't necessarily see as a space that the designer needs to do in all cases. But we do design wellness rooms into all of our new construction projects because there is really no replacement for being able to do what you need to do to feel centered holistically at home without having to check into a public gym or, pay to, attend a spa session. If you can do it at home, great.
Yeah. And I mean, music has become a huge therapy tool for so many people. I mean, I can't tell you how many stories during COVID of people calling up, and, there was a guy that was working in the hospitals in New York City that called us up, and he's like, I've got 2 hours of downtime between my 30 shifts in a row that I'm trying to save people's lives. And I just need a couple of hours to unwind. And so we put together a real serious portable audio system so that he can go into, one of the rooms, crash in a bed, put on some jazz to unwind. I mean, wellness has become such a huge a part of our lives now. So we have lots of technology-minded clients here at Moon Audio. From your perspective, what do your clients typically misunderstand about the integration of high-performance technology into luxury spaces?
What do they miss? I think many of them don't necessarily see it as like a passion. They see it as an attribute that's necessary for the modern home. And so often I've been asked to integrate it in a way that's seamless where you don't see it. And we're running miles of cables, home running back to an AV compartment or closet in a basement or attic or somewhere. And then we have to cool it. And, it involves, just a lot of technical complexity. And, audiovisual products and the whole genre is an exciting field. It's something that people are passionate about. Nothing, very much like automobiling, right? I mean, the
Oh
look
yeah.
and the feel of quality. It's not just a form of transportation, an automobile, very much like high quality audiovisual products. They have a feel to them, they have a sound to them, and the different products that can be had are, I don't want to call them status symbols because that sounds arrogant, but they become things that people own that they really care about and are part of an extension of who they are and what matters to them in life. And good quality and audiovisual design, I think, is really important for anybody who has an interest,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yes. Yeah. So I've got 3 daughters, and they've all sort of graduated from our home. I've still got some in school, but their bonus room, which used to be their turntable room on our second floor, we've now turned into a dedicated listening room for all things vinyl. I'm really getting back into physical media, and it really does sort of express my personality. It's sort of a place that I can go and really sort of you always have this feeling when you travel, like there's no place like home. There's no place like home, right? And in your home, then this space sort of is like my comfort zone, right? This is the room that I go to sort of just, I don't know, melt away and disappear and listen to music and just yeah. I mean, it's become such a huge part of an importance to my life right now. And it's fun. And yeah, and the look and feel of everything that's in there is so important. I love to show it off, and not so much from a bragging standpoint. I've got some fun and expensive stuff in there. Most of it, to be totally honest, is vintage gear that I've restored. Not a whole lot of it is, except for all the cabling, is Moon Audio, but the bulk of it is stuff that's from the 90s. Or there's this massive 300B tube amp that one of my mentors, who unfortunately passed away a year ago, was his for many years in his main listening room, and I was luckily enough to get that. And it's a memento piece for me in terms, it just reminds me of all the times I went to his house. And so at Moon Audio here, our clients want gear that's sounds amazing but looks beautiful when it's displayed. They typically don't want to hide their headphones and their amps and cabinets. It sounds like you're seeing sort of the same evolution in design. Everybody wants to show stuff off, right?
Absolutely. I had a client I think it was 2 years back. They went into an audio visual showroom, and there was a pair of monitor speakers about 5 feet tall. And with that, the salesperson put on one of Adele's tracks. And let me tell you something, they broke out into tears within seconds. And this daunting price of $66,000 for that pair of speakers was the first purchase that they made for their Mercer Street apartment here in Manhattan. And watching them and how it affected them, the importance of that to them as people, it was overriding every other decision we were there to help them make.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was more important than the textile scheme, than anything else, because of how it impacted them as people.
Yeah. I mean, music brings out emotion. I mean, I can tell you there's so many times when I'm listening to a track and like the hairs on the back of my neck will stand up sometimes if the music is really performed well and displayed well, and it invokes memories of times that I heard that song the first time, whether it be with family or friends or some kind of moment in life that's really important. It's definitely almost like a memento.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. So how do you see this evolving? What's the next frontier in tech integrated luxury design, do you think?
Ooh, that's a tough question. I think now I'm a novice at this. I'm frustrated right now with the limits of Bluetooth and its ability to carry a signal. And I feel like there needs to be some other way that you can try to help somebody. For instance, as you can see, I'm in a pre-war apartment. This apartment building was built in 1870. Trying to run wires in here is nearly impossible, especially and I have to go with a Wi-Fi router. I can't have everything hardwired in a place like this. So, with the equipment that I have, if it's going through Bluetooth, it's being reduced. I think the audio file, and so I think that that's something that really needs to progress as we move into the next phase. That's like off the top of my head what I'm feeling.
Without a doubt. I mean, obviously, I'm a wire guy, and I don't want to see my wires go away. There's always going to be a place for them. But yeah, I totally agree. My mom's in an apartment up on 108th Street, and trying to get Wi-Fi to work in just a small 3-bedroom apartment, with insanely thick concrete walls and steel in there. I mean, these buildings are built like bomb bunkers. I mean, they really are. And yeah, she can't run any wires. She's always got to hide the wires between like baseboard and stuff like that. It's a nightmare. And then the other concept about Wi-Fi and Bluetooth is, people don't want all this Wi-Fi and Bluetooth signals bouncing through their bodies. There's questions about how good is that from a health standpoint. We just, we don't know yet, right? So, the more they sort of boost the power, if you will, of Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, it may cause more health problems than anything else. And who knows? I think the more important thing is how to just make it less strength signal, but it doesn't have a problem. I don't know. I'm not a wireless engineer, but there's got to be a way to do a little bit less in terms of blasting us with all these waves, but improving the technology. And I'm sure I know we're going that direction. I mean, everything is just getting smaller and smaller and easier to deal with, and I'm sure there's going to be a solution. So without a doubt.
In the meantime, your wires are most important by far.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, we deal with a lot of music servers, and I always recommend to people, look, if they can run a wired connection, there's going to be less headaches, right? I mean,
Yeah,
Wi-Fi just isn't. It's not stable because there's so many other Wi-Fi networks going on in channels. They're all interacting, and all of the stuff that we have in our house is causing problems. So wired's always going to be more convenient. But yes, that's the key word, convenience. And at some point,
that's
I
it.
think we'll get to where Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and other radio wave technologies are going to be much better. So if someone's building a home studio, listening room, or a Zoom room, what's your advice as an interior designer? Where do they start? What do they do? What are the things they need to think about?
I think the first thing is to choose a place in the house that's quiet and isolated, right? You don't want the Zoom room or listening room to be anywhere near the kitchen or the basketball court or anything else where, people are going to be, even the media room where you have subwoofers and loud special effects and stuff. It should be, on at the quietest part of the home or apartment. um, I think that, the ability to run wires is critical. So, certainly reframe the walls with sheetrock if it's a possibility so that you can get wires around. Because for reasons you just described, I think that's really important for the successful all of it. And then having enough space to work with where you can have your equipment visible and all, but maybe you want to integrate it into millwork, and as we did in the Zoom room, like have the stuff, have equipment that partially recessed into cabinetry where you see the faces of it. So so that you're, for lack of a less appropriate term, rack is recessed, and what you're seeing is, the face of all the equipment. I think, is something to think about. And that way you can have a room with better, flow and character, if rather than having everything exposed. I'm not an advocate for tucking it all away, although I think that it's very sensible, in an architectural sense, to have things tidy, let's say.
How can people work with Pavarini Design or learn more about your approach?
We have a video that basically is us walking the customer through the experience, how it works. We address it on our website, but I think that that's something that we need to play up further. I was approached by a company that builds rooms like that for hosts when they're working from home. Like, I shouldn't reference names of people, but there's a newscaster who often broadcasts from his home and was asked to do a space like that. And I think it's really about awareness and networking, which we've started to do, but I see it as a really, really important thing for all types of professionals, whether they're communicating for business from home or simply trying to spend more time with their family. I mean, there's no replacement for you actually being there. Whether you're 2 hours on a Zoom call in another room, the fact is that you're there and you're home and you're with the family. And the most important thing as time elapses is making sure that you haven't missed any opportunities to engage. And I think that's a really important human condition in the modern era that needs to be fulfilled, because it's not required that we be on the go all the time any longer because of that.
Yeah, we'll make sure to put a link to that video down below so people can check it out. So last question: what music are you listening to and loving right now? I ask everybody this.
I think part of the problem is I have a crush on Dua Lipa.
Oh,
And
there you go.
so my last concert was Dua Lipa in concert. I was my roommates turned me on to the Grateful Dead, and I never saw myself as a hippie before.
Yeah, yeah.
But when I got into understanding the lyrics and the message, then you start to sing along with the songs. It gives you this feeling, and like you're talking about that hair standing up on the back of your head,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
get chills when the songs come on and they make you cry, because it's like the memories that they create. And so there's really no replacement for them either. And I've been a big fan of Billy Joel my whole life. There's
Amen.
no piano player who can make me do what my body does when I hear his music. And my music tastes are diverse. Those are some that I never that never come out of my cues, and I embrace all music that has great rhythm and great vocals and lyrics.
Did you get a chance to see Billy Joel at Madison Square Garden?
3 times.
Yeah, 3 times. That's everybody
What
says
an
that. You can't
experience.
go once. Yeah, yeah.
And the time that the one of the USS Marine aircraft carriers was stationed here off the coast, all of these servicemen came in
Oh,
and
wow.
were on the stage. I mean, there were some experiences with Billy Joel that were so moving and so patriotic and so American. It was just a pride that, is only an experience you have in the presence of somebody like that, a musician at that caliber.
So right now I'm listening to a band that I've known for a long time, and they just came to DPAC in Durham, Need to Breathe, who's actually a Christian band, but they market themselves as a rock and roll band, and that's why they become so popular. And so they're a great music to sort of really, when you're having a tough day, the messages in their songs are just fantastic, and I can just sit back and they really make me feel better. I highly recommend people check them out. Need to Breathe is just an absolutely fantastic band. They're sort of, I wouldn't, rock, country, folk, they're out of Tennessee. Absolutely fantastic. But Randall, this has been great. Thank you for sharing your perspective on where technology and design are heading together. For everyone watching, if you're interested in working with Pavarini Design on a project or want to learn more about Zoom Room concept, we'll drop all those links in the description below. And if you're building a luxury listening room, home studio, or any space where audio quality really matters, the team at Moon Audio can really help you find headphones, amplifiers, speakers, and all the cabling. I can't provide any Wi-Fi, but I can provide plenty of cabling that deserves to be displayed and not hidden. If you're enjoying this conversation, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and hit that notification bell. We've got more deep dives coming with people who are rethinking how we experience music and technology. Randall, thanks again for being here.
Drew, it was a total pleasure. I'm thrilled to have been included in this. Thank you.
And we'll see you guys next time on the Fidelity Exchange.